My name is Hugh Esco. I work by day at Vario. It's a web hosting company. I work in the Boca Raton office in South Florida, where they don't have seasons. It's kind of strange, but I'm adjusting, I suppose. I'm from Georgia. After hours, I work. I have an after-hours consultancy. Do business as Campaign Foundations, primarily offering web hosting services and application development services to Green Party candidates. But also we have a couple of commercial clients that we do some work for. I got excited about this when I saw Gene Kim talk to the Puppet Conference, I think 2 years ago. And he was talking about I don't remember which company it was exactly. Oh, Intuit, who in the middle of tax season was rolling out dozens of new versions every day to clients, to paying customers. And that seemed absolutely insane given how we had always done it. And so I started investigating. And so my work on this has really been in response to firefighting, which is something that Gene Kim talks about in his book, how we tend to spend a lot more time putting out fires than developing new functionality and creating tools that are useful. We are fighting the fires that have been left from the last time we rolled out. And since I began working on this project, I've had 2 stints of firefighting that have been absolutely maddening. But out of every time that that's happened, my systems have gotten stronger, and I'm not going to have to fight that fire again. So I'm going to... I got an hour's worth of slides to punch through in 20 minutes, and I'm going to gloss over most of those. What I really have to contribute here is how to use Jenkins and Pinto in order to help do continuous integration, well, I'm not quite at the point of continuous deployment, but at least continuous integration and of Perl-based applications. This book really kind of laid out the framework of what I have been doing. And when I first presented this, I as an introduction, mentioned that this was really something of a book report, not only on this book, but on a couple other books that I'm going to display during this thing. But Jez Humboldt and Dave Farley's continuous delivery has a lot to teach us about what's possible, and they don't spend any time talking about the tools so much as talking about the concepts and the framework. A lot of the graphics that you'll see in this slideshow are stolen from this book. Thank you, Jez and David. This is one thing that I really took away from this, is that if it hurts, we were talking just a moment ago about it, where at Vario we have a rule that nothing ever gets rolled out on a Friday. And this gentleman was saying that nothing ever gets rolled out where he works later than Wednesday. So if it's, I'm sorry.
I wish that was the case. When I did an earlier job, I didn't do stuff past Wednesday. It was
inviting problems, right?
Yeah.
Well, what Jez Humboldt and Dave Farley said in their book was that if it hurts, do it more frequently and automate it. And, I was talking to a gentleman last night who has been involved in developing a lot of the math modules in Perl. And I mentioned to him that every time I've had to touch GMP, it's been 2 days of remembering how it was I installed it the last time. And there's this website out in France somewhere, you got to get the the source, but the source is kind of broken, and it doesn't it's referring to paths that aren't there, and if you don't remember how you fixed that the last time, it's a pain in the ass, and it's been 2 days every time I've had to install it. Finally, in this last round of firefighting, the result of that 2 days was not an installed GMP, but a Puppet manifest that does it for me. So I can now do it more frequently, and it's automated, and I don't have to think about it. And if I do need to think about it, it's documented in my Puppet manifest. Jenkins is the CI server, the CI tool that I chose. Fairly full-featured, not quite. Its Perl support was kind of lacking. I actually created the wiki page about how to use Jenkins with Perl. I'm hoping that all of you will contribute to it and teach me more than I'll ever know. Apparently there are a lot of different CI servers. When I first started researching in this role, it was for my after-hours consultancy. Since then, Vario, where I work by day, has started implementing some CI workflows, and they're using the names of the tools escape me. But I also heard last night about a couple of different CI servers that are actually written in Perl for folks who want to get down the guts and help develop it and debug it. The process of installing Jenkins is these 4 lines, 6 lines of code. 4 lines of code to install, 2 lines of code to upgrade. This is for Debian. If you're working in Red Hat, there are recipes also on the Jenkins website. It's a WAR file, and fires up in a little JVM, and it does its business. And so that wasn't it provides what was one thing that was important to me, and one of the reasons I chose to go with Jenkins was it provided a means of locking it down, and so I could share internally what I needed to, but also make available our stuff to the world if I wanted to. This was the meat of what it took to be able to build Perl code inside of Jenkins. And it took me a couple of days to sort all this out, and it's a little more complicated than what I normally did. And I mean, it's kind of crazy, but I make clean before I make again. But that's what it took to get this finally to work. And normally I would do a prove on a type glob and get every test script in my test suite. But here working in Bash, I wound up doing a for do done loop in order to get the tests to act right and to produce the right output, so that the built-in tap tools that are built into Jenkins would know how to interpret them and display them test script by test script. Jenkins allows you, I could have written this in Python or Ruby or Perl, or you can put on the shebang line whatever you need, but it allows you to create build jobs through, I used here a shell interpreter. This is the wiki page that I put up that I'm hoping everyone will contribute to and give us some sense of what you're learning in this realm. I had took me a while to sort out how to set up the environment, and this is, when I first presented this was just a theory and it hadn't been tested. At this point, it's almost been tested. I'm now able to successfully use the cpan-m to build up a server. This comes out of my Puppet manifest, so this is working. Pinto, I want to highlight Pinto and thank Jeff Thaltheimer, I think is his name. We've met by IRC and email. He developed this tool called Pinto for curating a CPAN repository locally. And by curating, I think if I could speak for him, I think what he's saying is that your code works with this set of versions of this set of dependent modules, and you don't want to, when you're rolling out your code, have to depend on your user to experiment of pulling the latest off of CPAN. You want to be able to ensure that your user is deploying with the same dependency stack for your code as you used in development. And so Pinto is a tool that allows you to create and host a repository for Perl modules and to control what version is available. And by using this mirror only and mirror switch to CPAN-M, you can make sure that you're only pulling from your repository and that you get the whole stack that your code's been tested against, and you don't have to fake that. Again, Pinto allows you to authenticate. You could create a user ID and password and put that inside of the URL, http://user:/password at domain name or host name domain. And you could provide for authenticated access to the Pinto repository. One of the gotchas I ran into was resolved thanks to a little bit of help from Matt Trout by IRC, who pointed out that the taint mode strips out the Perl 5 lib from ink, and so I had to tell my test suite where to go find its libraries that I had just blown away. So Jez Humble and Dave Farley's book talk about the deployment pipeline. And this is basically what that looks like. And the idea is that we develop, we push our code to the repository. Our continuous integration server is watching our repository for updates, polling it at 5 or 20-minute intervals or whatever you set it up on a cron to do. And whenever it finds new code, a new version in the repository, it does a full checkout and builds in a clean environment from scratch. And it runs your test suite. And if it passes your unit test, that build gets archived in an artifacts repository, and the build gets promoted to the next stage of the deployment pipeline, where you could run automated acceptance test or capacity test or push it out to a server where it's available to human beings to do exploratory testing. This is kind of what it looks like in practice. Sometimes builds fail. You have to go back and try again. You move down the pipeline. Oh, wait a minute, that didn't quite work. Let's try it again. Eventually, things will make it back out into production 6 or 20 versions later. There is a module that will work with Jenkins that is designed to allow you to set up a build pipeline and visualize it inside the Jenkins interface. This is what it looks like on my server right now, where I'm doing first my commitment unit test and then my coverage testing. But eventually I will be automating acceptance test and maybe capacity testing and and on out to deployment. One of the points that's made in the continuous delivery book is the importance of an artifact repository, so that once you build the code, you don't have to rebuild it every time, and you take that artifact that worked the last, on your unit test, and you use that and reuse that repeatedly until it winds up in production. Pinto, when I first presented this slide highlighted JFactory, frog.net or something, which is an artifact repository that was developed, I think, primarily for Java code. And at 6 months ago, that's what looked like the way to go for me as well. But in this last round of firefighting, I discovered Pinto, and so now I'm using Jeff Thalheimer's code and using Pinto to store the work that I'm doing, but also the dependency stack. In acceptance testing, which is distinct from our unit testing and our integration testing, we try to express requirements in language that makes sense to users and to end users and to clients and to marketing people and to folks who don't speak code. There are tools that were designed for this. Here's a couple of books that were part of my initial book report that get to the heart of that. And there are several modules that have been written in Perl that have been designed to encourage the use of acceptance testing, Cucumber-style acceptance test in a Perl environment. Cucumber is a Ruby tool, but I've only played with one or two of these. I don't have any recommendations yet. I don't have any code to share, but I'm afraid that hopefully before the next round of firefighting, maybe I can get to this. Jenkins allows for the possibility of actually deploying code to into a working environment, maybe even a production environment. There's a tool called JCloud that is designed to interact with a number of different cloud hosting providers. I use Rackspace Cloud. You put in your credentials, your keys, your whatever, and it allows you to spin up servers in that cloud environment and push your code there, either for a build or for a deployment. This is one of the charts I stole from the Humble Farley book that talked about the maturity model. When I first started on this project, I was down here at level 1 at the bottom of the chart on almost everything, maybe levels -1, and level 0 on a couple. I was already using a Git repository. There were a couple of things I had already started doing right. I set it up and promised to do quarterly evaluations of where I started and how I'm doing against this maturity model that was outlined here. If you go to my website, there is a version of this chart that it will blow up large enough to read it. I can't quite read this without, without playing with all of that. But this is really a good checklist to look at your own work practices against and see, what makes sense. And that pretty much wraps up the 20 minutes I got. But I want to thank the folks who helped get me started, and the folks who helped mentor me ongoingly, and the folks on IRC who helped me develop this, answered questions to help move me along. And thank you, of course, for being here today.